it's really great to be here and have an opportunity to speak to you. I think a lot of the points that I'm going to mention have already been covered, which is fine because reinforcement never hurts when we're doing something like this. So I think the first question that comes up when you talk about patient-oriented research is, what is it? Why are we going to do it? And how are we going to do it? So what is it? Well, I mean, research is research, and you're not going to change that. But I think of patient-oriented research it's research with a twist, that you can have patients give input to, I've got here the question, but obviously a lot more than the research question that they can go right through, but I think it definitely starts with the research question. And, they may even help with the research. My background is primarily from the arthritis community, and so we've been doing this for quite a few years in a different group, and we've had a couple of times where we did say, oh, well, hold the phone here. That's not what we want research. The researchers were interested in pain. That, okay, yeah, pain is important, but that's part of life. It's every day we can manage that. We learn to live with it. What we really want to know is, what can you do about the overwhelming fatigue that comes with inflammatory arthritis? That gets us more than the pain. So sometimes, as I say, they can change the research question totally. They may leave the question but change the focus. So you're looking at it from the researcher perspective. The patient comes in and says, yeah, I can see that, I understand that, that's important. But for me, looking at it from this side is really more important. So they may change the focus. And as I said, they may even change the research question. They usually add relevance. And it's because of their lived experience or their experience as being a caregiver of a patient. So they've got that hands-on or lived experience that adds a totally different perspective and often adds a lot of relevance to the point. They can, often there's cost saving, and someone mentioned that previously, because if there's something that they're doing and they've learned to cope with it or manage it, and in the arthritis community, this is really great because we go to the dollar store and we find all of these things that will help us manage our lives. And in the meantime, the people who are trying to help us are sending us to a medical supply place and wanting us to spend $200 or $300. So you can transport that to other disease groups, and people learn to manage, they learn to cope. And yeah, sometimes you do need the really expensive stuff, but sometimes you can help with saving in the healthcare system, and heaven knows we need that right now. How do we do it? To me, that's really the big question, and that's what everyone is struggling with right now. This is relatively new. It's new to patients, it's new to researchers. So it's all well and good to say we want to involve patients in research, but how do we do that? And I don't have a magic answer to it. We're getting there, but it is a huge question. So some of the things over the years, some of my reflections that I've had, the first thing is, do you want patients involved? So figure that out first. Do you really want patients involved? And if you want them involved, why? Do you want them involved because of the experience and what they can bring to the table? Or do you want them involved because there is a line on that grant application that says you can only submit this grant when you have a patient involved? And I think I'm seeing some heads nodding. I think all of us who are patients have had that last minute call, my grant application is ready to go in, but I got to have a patient. Do you mind if we send you a letter and you can sign it and be on the grant? So it's something to consider when you're thinking about involving patients, exactly why. And there's nothing wrong with that. If it comes up at the last minute and you find you've got to have a patient, then don't ditch the whole thing, because you can always find someone last minute. But be upfront about why you're involving them. How do you want them involved? And this has been alluded to before. So figure out yourself what you want before you go looking for patients. Figure out what you want from them and what will help you in your research. What are your expectations? Again, if you know what you want and expect from the patients, it's much easier for you to relay that and to recruit patients, because that can be a whole other thing. How much time can you commit? It takes time. And I would venture to guess that there isn't one person in this room that isn't sitting with work that would fill a platter and they're trying to cram it onto a bread and butter plate. Everybody's lives are overloaded, they're overfull. So be realistic about the time that you can actually commit to doing this, because it will take time. Do you have training and support for patients and for your research team? Because it'll be new to them too. And Justin mentioned Involve in the UK. Certainly if you go on their website, there's some training materials there for patient engagement that you can access free of charge. The same with the PCORI website. You can access stuff there free of charge. The CIHR training for patients and researchers has just finished pilot projects, and they're going over that now and assessing that, and that will be released and available shortly. So some of the stuff from Involve and PCORI may not suit the Canadian context totally, but certainly you can get ideas and help from that. But definitely you have to have some type of training and a plan for it. Some of the practicalities: who do you need? Okay, so you want patients involved. Who do you need? Do you need men? Do you need women? Do you need older people? Do you need younger people? Do you need a mix? Do you want people with active disease, or do you want people whose disease is under control? How are you going to get diversity in this group? Because let me tell you, most of the volunteers are middle-aged, white, well-educated women. And to get beyond that and get everybody else involved is really difficult. So figure out who you want to be involved. Where can you recruit? And this is really tricky, because you're not the only people that are trying to recruit patients. Every group out there is trying to recruit patients, and there's a finite number of patients, and there's an even more finite number of patients who are willing to take part in it, or who have the time or the energy to do it. So think of the groups that you're associated with, so whether it's educational groups for patients, support groups for patients. Think about wherever you're located, the clinics where they see patients, the clinicians and the nurses that run those clinics. Ask them, have an idea of who you want, what you want them to do, what your expectations are. Go to those people and say, look, we want to involve some patients in our research. This is kind of a blueprint of who we're looking for, what we kind of need. If you have any patients that you think would be suitable or who would be interested, if you give them my name or pass it along, whatever, doing that can often garner you some really good recruits, and it's a lot better way of doing it than just tossing out an ad or something that we need recruits, because then you have to screen them all. So if you can get some referrals, it definitely works better for you and can save you a lot of headaches. The time commitment, so it's not only your time, but the volunteers' time. So is this research, is it Monday to Friday? Is it during the day? Does it involve any weekends? Does it involve any evenings? Does it go over the summertime, or do you take the summer off? So all of those things are really important aspects for patients to know, so they can say, well, yeah, I can do this, but I'm only available X amount of time, or I can only give you 1 hour a month. So be really upfront with what you expect for a time commitment. And let them know you've got in your head what your expectations are, but let the patients know what the expectations are for them. And let them know what you can offer in training. And it's not only training, it's ongoing support. I am a firm believer in having kind of a ladder of engagement. So you start here and you can go up. Because when you recruit patients, you'll have some that, they maybe get to the second rung on the ladder and they're really comfortable there. They have no intention and they don't want to go any higher. It's like asking me to be involved in methods and data. No way, sorry, not going on that rung at all. So figure out what you want and the training that needs to be with each rung of that ladder, and you'll have people, like I say, who stay right there and you'll have some that will go right up to the top of the ladder. But if the patients know that that's an option, they're much more willing to buy into it and take part than thinking, oh, geez, I got to jump in and I got to do all of this stuff and I don't know anything about it. So that can be helpful. And as Justin said, I know that sounds kind of dumb, assess the physical thing, but it is important because you're dealing with patients, and that's often overlooked. So, hospitals, universities are famous for the parking lot to be half a kilometer away, and so, can the patients really do that? Ask them what will work for them. Even the seating arrangements, where the screen is positioned. And, I'm very conscious of this because most of us in the arthritis community, if you want us to, we have to go like this to look at what's over there. So we don't turn that well. So make sure that things work from the physical aspect of it. Thorny issues, and no matter how well you recruit, how well you think you've got people matched up, these things will come up. And expenses are one of the issues that will come up. I don't think there's any question that mileage and parking or transportation and parking are covered. That's not, that's just a given as far as I'm concerned. People often will question about childcare and or caregiver relief. Very few groups can afford to cover that. And they have to be upfront with that. If they don't have the coverage, then they don't have it, but the patients need to know up front. The other thing is, let the patients know what they need to claim for their expenses, because if something happens, a meeting goes over mealtime, or they have to travel somewhere and they have to buy something, let them know that a credit card slip isn't going to do. Or, the taxi thing, they've got to have an actual receipt. It took me years to learn that I had to save my boarding passes because who wants a boarding pass? I've gone to the meeting, everybody'd see me there. Definitely I want to go home again. So to me, the boarding passes were just another piece of paper. It took me a long time, and I still have trouble with trying to remember to get an actual printed receipt for groups. So make sure that people understand that and why. The other thing is the reimbursement policy. Go to whoever manages that in your institution and find out the time frame, because I can tell you from personal experiences, universities and hospitals think that if you're reimbursed your expenses in 4 months, they've done really well. Well, if the patients are paying out of their pocket, and if you've recruited people who are on a fixed or limited income or a disability pension, I'm sorry, the person that's sitting in finance, they look at, I think, $75, that's not much. What are they griping about? I'll get to that. That might be that person's, a good portion of their hydro bill, a good portion of their groceries, whatever. So make sure you know what the reimbursement policy is and the time frame that that's going to cover so that people are prepared for it. Honoraria, I'm not going there. That is really a big issue. And I know that Involve and PCORI both have it mandated that you have to pay patients. CIHR is working on a policy, but I think the magnitude of the issue is coming to fruition. They're trying to get that policy together because it is huge. There's pros and there's cons. And all I'm going to say about it is go to the Change Foundation website. They've got a nice section on there that outlines the pros and the cons of paying honoraria. Read it, think about it really carefully, and think about your budget. And think about your budget for all of those, because if you've already got a grant in place and you decide, okay, I'm going to get some patients involved, do you have the money for it? Because trust me, mileage and parking can add up really quickly, never mind honoraria, if you have to pay those. So, figure that out before you go down that road. And when you're writing a new grant application, if it doesn't have it on it, add a line in for coverage for patient expenses, for the expenses and whatever you're going to cover if you are going to cover honoraria. So those are really important things. The other thorny issue is mismatches, or even worse, and these do happen no matter what you do. It can be a personality thing where they just, instead of the team working like this, they're butting heads all the time. It can be that the patient thinks they really want to do it, but they get there and they don't want to, but they don't want to hurt your feelings and tell you, yeah, I really don't want to do this. So they either don't show up, or they show up and they just sit there like a lump, but they don't contribute at all. So you have to be prepared to deal with that. The worst part is when you have had a patient in, and again, if someone isn't working over here, then say, like this research group over here is doing something different. I'd like you to work with them for a little bit and try them in different spots, because maybe they didn't fit with this group, but maybe they might fit with that group. If you've tried a few things and if they don't fit anywhere, then you have to bite the bullet. And actually at a meeting in Baltimore last week, I was talking with one of our Canadian researchers, and this was the exact issue. She said, we've done this and this and this, and what I said, the only thing I can see is that you hire the volunteer. So she went home to do that. And sometimes you have to do that. And in about 20 years of working with volunteers, I think I've done it 4 times. It's not fun. Nobody wants to do it. So you try to slot them in other places, because again, you don't want to lose volunteers, but sometimes it just has to be done. That's just a reality of life. Benefits to patients, and I think you should use this in your recruiting so that they know. All of us with long-term or chronic diseases, we think we know all about our diseases. We may know a lot, but we don't know everything. You can always increase your knowledge, and it's helpful to you. And we all don't know what's coming down the pipe in terms of research, and so getting involved can be really helpful to us there. And as strange as it seems, it can often improve adherence. Because if you've been taking something, or you've got to take something for the rest of your life, trust me, it can get pretty old pretty fast. And so for whatever reason, you maybe skip your medication or your treatment, and you think, well, gee, I didn't do that last week and I feel okay. So next week you think, oh, well, I'm fine, so I'm going to miss it again. And all of a sudden, about 4 weeks, and you're not feeling so good. And then you think, okay, now what do I do? Do I start it up again? Do I tell my doctor what I've done? What do I do? Because sometimes when you skip that, you can't get back to where you were before. And the patients don't realize that until too late. So understanding more about the treatment and the necessity for keeping it up and the half-life and how they can get fooled into thinking they don't need it any longer, it can be helpful to them, and it can help with their adherence to their treatment. They make friends with others, and this is particularly important when you have a group of patients involved in research. Your family, your friends, your partner, spouse, whatever, can be as supportive as they like. But you don't tell them everything. They don't understand everything. They're not living the disease, nor is your doctor. And you don't tell your doctor everything. But trust me, when patients get together and they form a group and they bond, nothing is sacred. They discuss everything and anything. But they also come up with support and solutions for one another. And it can be really helpful. And a lot of the people that I've met through my involvement in research, I've been friends with them for 20 years, and we still support one another. And, it carries on, because the new people that come in, we help them. So it can be really important for them. And they also become research ambassadors, because if you don't know anything about research, why would you plug it? You hear it out in the community all the time. Why are we spending all that money on research? We need that money in our hospitals. We need that to reduce the wait times. We need it for this. We need it for that. We're just wasting money. We've done all that research and things aren't getting any better. People, when they get involved in research, understand that the path from the bench to the bedside, and they become research ambassadors. And when somebody starts to say, well, we don't need to do research, say, hey, stop a minute. Yeah, we do, and this is why. So they can be really helpful to you. It's in a low-key way, but trust me, every little bit helps. Long-term, I think that patients should be involved in, whether you call it knowledge transfer, knowledge translation, right from the beginning. And I think if you can draft what I would call a canned presentation in lay language that lets them know exactly what they can say, because it's just important what they can say, what they can't say, because you don't want them jeopardizing something you're going to publish. So having a presentation that's prepared for them, and there'll be some in the group that won't touch that with a 10-foot pole, but there'll be others that are really anxious to get out and talk to community groups, organizations, and spread the word about what you're doing and why it's important and what's happening. So I'm a firm believer in involving patients right from the beginning there, because it does help with implementation. And we know there's a big path from the bench to the bedside, but if patients know that something's coming, or they know that it's here and it probably is available, trust me, they're really vocal. They won't ask for it, they'll demand it. So it helps with your implementation process because they know that's there and they either want it for themselves or their family or friends. So involve them right away. My contact info, if anybody has any questions, is that. My parting advice would be patient with patients. It does take patience, and sometimes, trust me, you'll be ready to tear your hair out with them.